The channel's published Raphael episode established something that bears repeating as a starting point, not because the audience missed it, but because what this episode builds on depends on what that episode already settled. In 1st Enoch, chapters 9 and 10, 4 archangels receive 4 commissions. Each one is named. Each one is assigned a specific task, a specific target, a specific scope of action. Raphael's commission was the most forensically detailed, the one that read in structure and specificity like a surgical order. Gabriel's was directed at the offspring of the transgression itself. Uriel's was the warning delivered to a single man. Michael's was the broadest, the commander, the one with the longest timeline. That characterization is accurate as far as it goes. The published episode named Michael's target Semyaza, the leader of the Watchers who descended, and identified Michael's commission as an authority-based one. Bind, imprison, wait for judgment. What it did not open was the timeline itself. The published episode called it the longest timeline, without specifying what that timeline actually is. That is not a criticism. Summarizing 4 commissions in a single episode requires exactly that kind of compression. But the compression left something closed. 1st Enoch 10:11 to 12 specifies it. There is a number in that text, a deliberate one, 70 generations. Semyaza and his companions will be bound beneath the valleys of the earth, and they will remain there for 70 generations, and then they will be led away to judgment in fire. That number raises a question the text itself does not answer. What were the writers counting toward? By the end of this video, you will understand what 1st Enoch 10:11 to 12 actually specifies about Michael's commission that the broader account leaves implicit. What 70 generations meant as a deliberate unit of end-time reckoning. Eschatological, in the scholarly vocabulary, to the community that produced this text, and why the same precise hierarchical logic that appears in 1st Enoch reappears in Daniel 10, written in a different context, drawing on a related but independent angelological world. If 2 textual traditions reflect the same angel with the same structural characteristics, named, ranked, assigned a specific adversary, operating inside a precise cosmological hierarchy, that consistency is not coincidence. It is evidence that the office existed in the imagination of Second Temple Judaism as something coherent, something stable, something more than one author's invention. What collapsed that specificity into a generic category label is exactly the kind of question this series exists to ask. One more thing. 1st Enoch's commission for Michael preserves a hierarchy between Semyaza and his companions. It names the leader first, the associate second, and makes Michael enforce a judgment that remembers who organized the transgression. Hold that hierarchy. The fourfold commissioning in 1st Enoch 9 to 10 is already established channel knowledge. Michael is already characterized, the commander, the broadest mandate, the longest timeline. By the end of this chapter, you will understand exactly what the published account left unspecified about Michael's particular commission text, and why the difference between a summary and a primary text always matters. The Raphael episode did the necessary work of situating Michael within the fourfold commissioning framework. To recall the established position, in 1 Enoch 9, 4 archangels, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael, hear the cries ascending from the earth. The watchers have descended, fathered children with human women, and the consequences of that transgression are consuming the world. The Nephilim are devastating the earth. The souls of the dead are crying out, unable to ascend. The 4 archangels bring the petition before the divine throne. And in 1 Enoch 10, each receives a specific commission in return. Uriel is sent to warn Noah. Raphael is sent to bind Azazel. Gabriel is sent to the children of the Watchers. Michael is sent to Semyaza. That sequence is established. This episode does not re-narrate it. What it opens is something the published summary left closed. There is a meaningful difference between characterizing Michael's commission as the broadest mandate with the longest timeline and reading what the text of 1 Enoch 10:11 to 12 actually says about that commission clause by clause. The difference between a summary and a primary text is always the same. The summary names the conclusion. The text shows the mechanism. And the mechanism is what this episode is interested in. Consider what the summary preserved and what it necessarily elided. The published characterization was accurate at the level of function. Broadest mandate describes the scope of Michael's authority relative to the other 3 commissions. Uriel warned one man, Raphael targeted one figure, Gabriel addressed one class of beings, and Michael was assigned the entire leadership structure of the Watcher transgression and the full community of its participants. At that level of abstraction, broadest mandate is defensible and precise. Longest timeline is similarly accurate as a high-level descriptor. Of the 4 commissions, Michael's has the most extensive temporal dimension. The imprisonment he is charged with maintaining spans the entire interval between the Watcher's fall and the final judgment. None of the other 3 commissions carries that duration, but neither of those descriptors tells you what the text specifies as the mechanism of the commission. They do not tell you how the imprisonment is structured. They do not tell you what the designated duration is. They do not tell you what hierarchy is preserved between Semyaza and his associates. And they do not tell you what the text gives as the end point. The summary said the longest timeline. The text gives a number. That difference matters for a reason that has nothing to do with pedantry or completionism. The Enochic authors were not casual with numbers. This is a point that the scholarship on 1 Enoch has established with some confidence. George Nicholsburg, whose commentary on 1 Enoch chapters 1 through 36 in the Hermania series, the flagship critical commentary series in biblical studies, remains the standard critical reference, has documented extensively the deliberate numerical and structural patterning within the Book of the Watchers. The Enochic tradition was engaged in a specific kind of theological argument, one that took the architecture of the cosmos seriously, that treated the arrangement of angels and the hierarchy of heavenly assignments as real and structured, as real as the court of a king, with ranked officials and defined portfolios, and that approached the timeline of history as something that could, in principle, be calculated. The book of 1st Enoch as a whole is a composite text. Scholars including Nicolsburg and Michael Knibb have documented the distinct compositional layers: the Book of the Watchers, the Similitudes, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dreams, and the Epistle of Enoch are not from a single hand or a single period. But within the Book of the Watchers, which occupies chapters 1 through 36 and contains the commissioning narrative this episode is concerned with, the internal consistency is sufficient that the Aramaic fragments recovered from Qumran, some of the oldest physical evidence for the text, confirm the antiquity and compositional intentionality of the Watcher's narrative. This was not casual composition. When the text gives a number for the duration of Michael's commission, the number is not ornamental. It is part of the argument. What the published episode described as the longest timeline is in the text a specific eschatological calculation: 70 generations. That specificity has implications for how the commission should be understood, not just as a general authority function, but as a designed component of a broader cosmological framework. Michael's commission is bounded. It has an endpoint, and the text specifies what that endpoint is. There is one more thing the summary left closed that this episode opens. The commission text in 1st Enoch 10:11-12 does not address Semyaza and his associates as an undifferentiated group. It addresses them in a hierarchy, the leader named first, the associates named second, and that distinction carries structural weight beyond grammar. The nature of that weight is what Chapter 4 discloses. For now, the published episode established that Semyaza is bound alongside his associates. It did not establish what it means for the commission to name the leader first and the follower second, and what that hierarchy required of the angel assigned to enforce it. That hierarchy is internal to the commission text itself, and it is one of the things that makes the commission architecturally more precise than bind and imprison captures. And within that architecture, the text preserves a hierarchy between Semyaza and his companions, a hierarchy the Raphael episode did not open. What that hierarchy required of Michael waits for Chapter 4. The general shape of Michael's commission has been established on this channel for the better part of a year. The actual text of 1st Enoch 10:11-12 is more specifically constructed than the summary suggested, and the specificity is where the argument this episode is making lives. 1st Enoch 10:11-12 is the primary commission text for Michael in the Watcher's narrative. It does not simply say, "Bind them." It specifies a duration, a location, a named principle, and named associates, and a terminal event distinct from the imprisonment itself. By the end of this chapter, you will understand exactly what the text says and what each element of the commission implies about how the Enochic authors structured Michael's authority. Before presenting the text, a textual caveat that the scholarship requires. 1st Enoch survives in its most complete form in Ethiopic, in Ge'ez, the classical liturgical language of Ethiopia, in manuscripts that date to the 14th century and later. This is not ideal for a text whose compositional core most scholars place in the 3rd century BCE or earlier. The gap between composition and surviving manuscript is substantial. However, the Aramaic fragments from Qumran, recovered from the Dead Sea Scrolls and studied extensively by Michael Knibb, and more recently by Lauren Stuckenbruck, confirm the antiquity of the Book of the Watchers specifically, and support the main lines of the Ethiopic text, even where the Aramaic is fragmentary. The cross-reference between the two manuscript traditions provides scholarly confidence in the substance of what the text says, if not always in every detail of every reading. When specific verse readings are cited in this episode, they follow Nickelsburg's critical commentary in the Hermeneia series, which provides the standard scholarly text and translation, with notes on variant readings where they exist. Small variations between Ethiopic manuscripts are a feature of this material. Acknowledging that is not a disqualification of the text. It is an honest account of what it means to work with ancient composite literature. With that caveat made, here is the commission text. 1 Enoch 10:11-12 reads, following Nickelsburg's rendering closely. And to Michael, the Lord said, Go, Michael, bind Semyaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days they shall be led away to the abyss of fire, and to the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. That is the commission in full, or near enough to full, that the substance is present and the structure is legible. 4 elements deserve careful separation, because each one does specific and independent work. The first element is the address structure. The commission opens with a named subject, Semyaza, and then immediately names his associates as a second subordinate group. This is not incidental. The grammar mirrors the grammar of the transgression it is responding to. In 1 Enoch 6, Semyaza is named as the one who organized the descent, proposed the oath, and accepted the position of primary responsibility if things went wrong. The descent is structured around a hierarchy of culpability. The commission that responds to it is structured around the same hierarchy. Semyaza first, his associates second, and named as his associates. The second element is the specification of location. The commission does not say imprison them in general terms. It specifies a cosmological address, the valleys of the earth, beneath the earth's surface. The Enochic cosmology is layered. The heavens have multiple tiers, and so does the underworld. The bound watchers are placed in a specific register of the cosmos. In a location, the text treats as a real cosmological address. The cosmos has architecture, and the commission is issued in terms that engage with that architecture. The third element is the duration, 70 generations. A finite number, not until the end of time, not forever, but a calculated interval with a beginning and an end. Michael's commission is not a permanent guardianship. It is a fixed-term assignment with a specified endpoint, after which the imprisoned figures will be led to judgment. The question of what 70 generations maps onto is the subject of chapter 3. The structural point here is simply that the commission gives a number. The fourth element is the terminal event. The commission distinguishes between the imprisonment and the final judgment. At the end of the 70 generations, the bound watchers are not released. They are led to the abyss of fire, to torment and prison, in which they will be confined forever. Two distinct phases. The temporal imprisonment, which has a duration, and the final judgment, which does not. Michael's commission governs the interval. The judgment itself is a subsequent and permanent act. The commission precedes it and makes it possible. These four elements together, hierarchical address, specified location, finite duration, terminal event, constitute the architecture of the commission. None of them appears in the summary characterization, broadest mandate, longest timeline. Both of those phrases are accurate. None of the architecture is present in them. Bind Semyaza, bind his companions, 70 generations, beneath the valleys of the earth, until the day of their judgment. There is a clock in this commission. Michael is assigned to keep it. What that tonal beat is meant to land is this. The commission is not vague. It is structured like a legal sentence with named defendant, named associates, specified conditions of confinement, a fixed term, and a designated terminal event. Michael is not being asked to improvise a response to the watcher's transgression. He is being asked to execute a sentence that has already been fully specified. To serve as the officer of a court whose judgment is already determined. The nature of his authority is therefore not creative or discretionary in its primary function. It is custodial and structural. He holds the confinement for the duration. He administers the hierarchy between principal and associates throughout. He initiates the transfer at the end. That is a specific kind of authority. It is not less than commander implies. It is more architecturally particular. And the sentence applies to Semyaza and to his companions in terms that preserve the hierarchy the commission opened with. The leader named first, the associate second, and a commission designed to honor that distinction throughout the duration of its term. The commission's grammar preserves the hierarchy between Semyaza and his companions. How that hierarchy shapes Michael's specific authority is what chapter 4 discloses. A specific number, a specific endpoint, a specific location. The most defensible objection to taking any of this as meaningful precision is that 70 and its multiples are standard biblical round numbers, and this text is probably just reaching for one of them. 70 generations is a number that biblical literature uses conventionally, and the case for reading it as approximate rather than arithmetically precise is a real scholarly position with legitimate textual evidence behind it. By the end of this chapter, you will understand both that case and why the Enochic usage is distinguishable from a purely conventional deployment of the number. The most honest version of the objection goes as follows. Apocalyptic literature uses conventional numbers. It uses them extensively and without apology. The number 70, and multiples and fractions of 70, appears throughout the biblical tradition, in contexts where no one seriously argues for arithmetical precision. The book of Daniel, which will feature in chapter 5, speaks of 70 weeks as the appointed duration for Daniel's people's redemption. A figure that has generated centuries of interpretive effort, but that most critical scholars treat as a symbolic and theologically constructed interval, rather than a chronological prediction susceptible to precise dating. The book of Jeremiah speaks of 70 years of Babylonian captivity, a round figure for a period of exile, not a count derived from astronomical tables. The Table of Nations in Genesis 10 lists 70 peoples. 70 elders accompany Moses to the mountain in Exodus 24. The number functions, across these and dozens of other instances, as a unit of completeness, a full symbolic measure of a long time, a large group, a sufficient number. The connotations of totality and wholeness are what the tradition is reaching for, not a calculation that can be checked. Given that context, the charge that 70 generations in 1st Enoch is doing conventional symbolic work rather than arithmetical work is not a dismissal. It is a reading with deep roots in how the biblical tradition actually handles numbers. The Enochic text on this view is using the number the way every other Second Temple text uses it, to convey duration, to signal completeness, to imply that the imprisonment will last a very long time without committing to any specific generational count. That reading cannot be dismissed by assertion. The counter-argument has to engage with what it is actually countering, which means acknowledging that the conventional number reading is serious before explaining what distinguishes the Enochic usage. What distinguishes it is not a single proof. It is a cumulative set of observations about the Enochic tradition's relationship to chronology. The Enochic community was not indifferent to arithmetic. This is among the most consistently documented findings of recent Enochic scholarship. The astronomical book, one of the major sections of 1st Enoch, is an extended argument about the structure of the calendar. How many days are in a year? How solar and lunar cycles relate? What the correct method of counting time is. The Dead Sea Scrolls confirm that calendar reckoning was a live and contested issue among Second Temple Jewish communities, and that the Enochic tradition held a specific position in that debate, a 364-day solar calendar, as against the lunar calendar used by other groups. A tradition that argued about astronomical time at length and with sophistication, that treated correct chronology as a theological commitment, does not casually reach for round numbers when it constructs the central sentence of its foundational narrative. Scholars working on 1st Enoch's internal chronology have attempted to reconstruct what the 70 generations maps onto. Nicolsburg's commentary engages with this problem directly. What emerges is that the authors may have been working within the Genesis genealogies. The named generation counts from Adam to Noah and beyond, and counting forward from within, that framework toward an eschatological endpoint. Scholars have argued that the 70 generations figure is best understood within a generational arithmetic shaped by the Genesis genealogies, rather than as a straightforward borrowing from Daniel's weeks or Jeremiah's years. Whether that calculation is recoverable to a single agreed correspondence is another matter. The scholarly debate has not settled it. But the intent to be precise, The use of a generational framework rather than a purely symbolic gesture is visible in the text's own structure. The round number reading is not wrong to notice that 70 functions symbolically in biblical literature. The inadequacy is in stopping there. The Enochic text is not simply borrowing a symbol. The number is embedded in a sentence with an internal architecture, a duration, a location, a hierarchical address of principal and associates, produced by a community for whom numbers were arguments rather than decorations. That combination of context and structure distinguishes the usage from a conventional deployment of the number, even if the calculation behind it remains contested. What the first 3 chapters have assembled is not a round number and a vague promise. The 70 generations sentence is structurally precise in its own terms. It sets a bounded duration. It places the imprisoned figures in a specific cosmological location. It preserves in its grammar the hierarchy between the principal and the companions. And it embeds Michael's commission inside a timetable that the tradition's own internal arithmetic was intended to calculate. Seen together, those elements are not features of a conventional symbolic gesture. They are features of a sentence that someone designed to be enforced. The second half of this video asks what enforcing it required, and why the same design shows up in Daniel. Before that argument, the 70 generation sentence is issued to a group whose internal hierarchy the commission preserves in its opening address. The nature of that preserved hierarchy is what Chapter 4 presents. The number, whatever its precise calculation, is embedded in a sentence that names a leader before it names anyone else. What that naming required of Michael is the question Chapter 4 opens. Whether the number is exact or approximate, the text treats it as a sentence with a structure, a duration, a designed endpoint, and a leadership hierarchy it maintains deliberately. That leadership hierarchy is where the full architecture of the commission becomes visible. First, Enoch's commission for Michael distinguishes Semyaza from the angels who followed him, but not by giving him a wholly separate final fate. The distinction is hierarchical and juridical. The distinction a court draws between the one who ordered the crime and those who carried it out, leader named as principal, others as associates. By the end of this chapter, you will understand how that hierarchy shapes Michael's commission without overstating what the text actually says. The distinction, when read carefully, is grammatical before it is theological. The commission in 1 Enoch 10:11-12 opens with a dual address. Bind Semyaza and his associates. Semyaza is named as an individual. His associates are named as a category defined by their relationship to him. They are not named individually. They are named as his associates, which means their identity in the commission is derivative of his. This is a hierarchical grammar. The principal named first, the subordinates named second, and named as subordinates. The commission structure mirrors the transgression structure with deliberate precision. In 1 Enoch 6, when the plan to descend is being formed, Semyaza's role is clear. He is the one who initiates the proposal, who organizes the oath, and who, tellingly, expresses reluctance not because he objects to the plan, but because he does not want to bear the blame alone, if the transgression goes wrong. He accepts the position of leader and accepts with it the position of primary culpability. The 200 watchers who swore the oath with him are named in the text, a long list of leaders among them. But their identity in the narrative is structured around Semyaza's leadership. They followed. He led. The commission in 1 Enoch 10 does not forget this. The grammar of the binding order reproduces the grammar of the transgression. The leader first, named in singular. The associate second, named collectively and relationally. Michael is not being sent to manage an undifferentiated group of offenders. He is being sent to enforce a judgment that already embeds a hierarchy of culpability, and he is receiving his instructions in terms that reflect that hierarchy. What Nicholsburg's commentary makes visible, and what the Ethiopic manuscripts support, with the caveat that manuscript variation is present, is that the commission preserves a juridical hierarchy across both its grammar and its temporal structure. In 1 Enoch 10:11-12, a temporal clause precedes the binding order for the full duration. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations. The pronoun is plural. The whole group is made to see the consequences of what they caused. The Nephilim, their sons, slaughtering each other. The human women, the relationships the watchers formed, destroyed. The witnessing of that destruction is part of the judgment. It precedes the imprisonment and is built into the structure of the sentence. The text does not give each of the 200 an individual sentence. It gives a collective sentence structured around a named principle. But because Semyaza is named as that principle, the one who organized the dissent, who held the others to the oath, who accepted primary culpability at the outset, the witnessing clause carries particular force for him. The consequences the group witnesses are consequences he initiated. The sentence does not allow the judgment to begin without the group seeing what the leader's decision produced. The companions are bound. Semyaza is bound with them. Their final outcome is shared. But the text does not begin with the group. The companions are bound until judgment. Semyaza is bound until judgment. The final outcome is shared. But the text does not begin with the group. It begins with the name, Semyaza first, his associates second. The hierarchy survives the sentence. The authority this implies for Michael is not generic. It is not the authority of a warden managing a uniform population. It is the authority of an enforcer who understands the internal hierarchy of what he is enforcing. Who the principal was, what the structure of the principal's culpability consists of, and what it means to hold a named principal distinct from his named associates across the duration of an imprisonment. A commissioner who can do that is not being given a detention assignment in any simple sense. He is being given a commission that requires juridical memory, the capacity to hold the distinction between leader and followers, between principal and associates, between the one who organized the transgression and those who joined it, across the full duration of a 70-generation imprisonment. There is a theological argument embedded here that the Enochic tradition was making deliberately. The distinction between Semyaza and his associates is not about degrees of punishment in any simple quantitative ranking. It is about the moral logic of accountability. The difference any court draws between the one who planned the act and those who executed it, between the instigator and the accessories. That distinction is what the text is encoding. The tradition that produced first Enoch was deeply interested in questions of responsibility and the appropriate differentiation between those who initiate transgression and those who participate in it. The Watcher's narrative is, among other things, an extended argument about those questions. About what happens when angelic figures with knowledge and rank make the kind of decisions Semyaza made. The commission text is the answer the tradition gives. The judgment preserves the hierarchy of the transgression, and the officer executing the judgment is required to understand and maintain that hierarchy throughout. This is the internal architecture that commander as a category label does not reach. The authority function it names is real and correctly named. What it does not name is the specificity of what the authority is operating over. Not a uniform group, not a single adversary, but a hierarchically structured company of transgressors whose collective sentence is organized around a named principle. Michael's commission, read in full, is a commission to enforce a hierarchically organized judgment over a bounded interval inside a designed cosmological timetable. That is a more particular kind of authority than commander conveys, even though commander is accurate as far as it goes. One ancient text, one commission, one hierarchy preserved across a sentence that applies to the whole group. A different text, written in a different context, describes the same angel using the same structural logic, without demonstrable knowledge of the Enochic commission. Daniel 10's description of Michael as one of the chief princes was the central argument of this channel's Michael Episode 1. It reappears here not to be redeveloped, but to be placed alongside the Enochic commission. By the end of this chapter, you will understand why. The cross-textual structural consistency between Daniel and 1st Enoch is the strongest single claim this episode is making, and what that consistency implies about how Michael was understood in Second Temple Jewish theological imagination. The Michael EP1 argument does not need to be rebuilt. To recall the established position in the minimum necessary terms, in Daniel 10, a heavenly figure appears to Daniel and explains that he was delayed in coming because the prince of Persia resisted him for 21 days until Michael, specifically named, specifically described as one of the chief princes, came to help him. Daniel 10:21 identifies Michael as the one who stands as a support for the heavenly figure against the princes of Persia and Greece. Daniel 12:1 identifies Michael as the great prince who stands over Daniel's people and who will stand at the time of unprecedented distress that precedes the resurrection of the dead. Two elements of the Danielic portrait are structurally essential to this episode's argument. Both were covered in Michael EP1, and both are now being placed in a new relationship. The first element is the rank designation, one of the chief princes. In Daniel's heavenly court, there is a structured assembly of ranked angelic figures. Michael is not at the top of that assembly. One of the chief princes places him at a high rank within a group. not as a singular, supremely ranked figure above all others. He is among the chief princes, which implies that there are others at the same level. The designation positions Michael within a hierarchy rather than outside or above it. He has rank. That rank is defined relationally by reference to the existence of other princes at or near the same level. The hierarchical logic is embedded in the title. The second element is the assignment logic. In Daniel's heavenly court, the princes are assigned to specific peoples. The Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece are named as adversarial figures. They represent in the heavenly register the nations that are adversarial to Daniel's people on the earthly register. Michael is identified as the prince standing over Daniel's people, the counterpart figure in the hierarchy, the one whose assignment corresponds to Israel in the same way the Prince of Persia corresponds to Persia. The logic of assignment is named angel, specific people or adversary, defined scope, position within a ranked structure. The commission is not generic. It is a specific portfolio within a structured cosmological arrangement. Now place the Danielic portrait beside the Enochic commission. In 1 Enoch 10, Michael is given a named target, Semyaza, named individually. He is given a specific community of associated figures, Semyaza's associates, named as a category. He is given a specific location for the imprisonment. He is given a specific duration. He is given a specific terminal event. The commission is precise, bounded, and structured around a named principle within a cosmological arrangement that has defined architecture. Michael's position within that arrangement, one of 4 archangels, each with a specific assignment, implies a ranked structure. He is not the only figure with authority. He holds a specific portfolio within a group of figures who each hold specific portfolios. In Daniel 10, Michael is identified by rank, one of the chief princes, and by assignment, he stands for a specific people. The heavenly court is a ranked structure of princes, each holding specific assignments. Michael's rank is defined relationally. His authority is specific and bounded. The structural logic in both texts is the same. Named angel, ranked within a structured heavenly assembly. Specific assignment, defined adversary or ward. Precise scope of authority. The commission is not a general mandate to intervene wherever needed. It is a specific portfolio held within a structured hierarchy. What there is evidence of is a convergence on the same structural imagination. And the convergence is significant precisely because it does not require coordination to explain it. This is what the cross-textual comparison is actually claiming. Not that the two texts are saying the same theological thing, not that their authors intended to coordinate, not that Michael is described identically in both. Something more specific, that the structural logic, named, ranked, specific assignment, defined adversary, is stable enough in Second Temple, Jewish theological imagination, to be independently expressed in two contexts and emerge looking structurally the same. Think of it as finding the same floor plan in two courthouses built by architects who never met. The plan itself, judge, jurisdiction, adversary, defined scope, was the shared inheritance. Both texts drew from it without needing to copy each other. That is what coherent means in the argument being made here, not metaphysically proven, historically stable in the tradition, independently expressible, present in the imagination before either text codified it. That is what coherent means in the argument being made here, historically stable in the tradition, independently expressible, present in the imagination before either text codified it. Two texts, same angelological grammar, no demonstrable coordination, and popular tradition collapsed the whole of it into a single word. Michael the Commander is the characterization this channel established in the Raphael episode, and that Michael episode 1 built on. It is accurate as far as it goes. By the end of this chapter, you will understand specifically what that accurate label leaves unnamed, and what the process of traditional reduction looked like when it happened. Commander names the authority function correctly. That function is real, it is textually grounded, and this channel's established characterization of Michael's power as authority. Command hierarchy is accurate to both the Enochic and Angelic materials. This episode is not arguing against that characterization. It is arguing about what that characterization does not reach. What Commander does not name is the duration. The commission in 1 Enoch 10:11-12 specifies 70 generations, a finite and structured interval that the Enochic authors treated as a calculable component of the cosmos's designed timeline, not as a rhetorical gesture toward permanence. Michael's commission operates inside a bounded window. It has a beginning, a duration, and an end point. Commander does not convey any of that. What Commander does not name is the internal hierarchy. The commission preserves a distinction between Semyaza, as named principal, and his associates, as named associates. Semyaza's culpability as the one who organized the descent and held the others to oath is reflected in the structure of the commission itself. The group witnesses the consequences of what he initiated before the imprisonment begins, and it is his name that opens the binding order. Michael's commission required holding that hierarchy, keeping the principal distinct from the associates, across the full duration of the imprisonment. Commander does not convey that either. What Commander does not name is the cross-textual coherence. Daniel 10 reflects the same angelological grammar, ranked, specifically assigned, defined adversary, precise scope, without demonstrable dependence on the Enochic text. The fact that two traditions, not demonstrably in contact, produce the same structural configuration implies that the office was a stable feature of Second Temple Jewish theological imagination, not the invention of a single author or a single community. Commander, as a category label, is too generic to carry that implication. What happened over the centuries of tradition that followed the Second Temple period was a comprehensible process. The Enochic tradition as a whole lost institutional standing. The book of 1 Enoch is not in the Hebrew Bible. It is not in the Christian Old Testament canon as it is widely received, with the significant exception of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, which includes it as scripture. The Enochic community's particular concerns, the calendar argument, the Watcher's mythology, the detailed cosmological architecture, were largely absorbed, transformed, or set aside as the rabbinic and early Christian traditions took shape around different priorities. What remained of Michael in those traditions was the authority function, the warrior, the protector, the general of the heavenly army who defeats Satan in the book of Revelation, who disputes over the body of Moses in the Epistle of Jude, who is depicted in countless medieval icons with a sword and a scale. That figure is not invented. The authority function is real and has genuine textual grounding. But the tradition retained the function and shed the architecture. The 70 generations did not survive. The hierarchical structure of the commission did not survive. The angelological grammar of ranked specific assignment within a structured heavenly hierarchy did not survive in popular form. What survived was a name and a role: Michael, warrior, commander, protector. This series is not arguing that the role is wrong. It is arguing that the role is what you get when you abstract a specific figure out of a specific textual context and into a tradition that has different priorities. The Michael of 1 Enoch 10:11-12 exists inside a cosmological argument about the structure of the heavenly court, the accountability of angelic transgression, and the designed arc of history toward a specific judgment. The Michael of popular tradition exists outside that argument, because the argument was largely lost with the Enochic tradition's marginalization. Reading the text before the tradition absorbed it is the premise of this series. That premise is what brings us to this episode, and it is what will carry the Michael arc forward. The next episode will place the Enochic commission alongside the figure the tradition most persistently positions as Michael's adversary, Lucifer. That comparison is where the popular imagination has done some of its most consequential architectural work, flattening a complex set of textual relationships into a simple cosmic duality. That is for another episode. What this episode has assembled across 6 chapters warrants a moment of deliberate review. Not as repetition, but as accumulation. The way a long argument earns the right to be seen whole before it ends. The Raphael episode characterized Michael's commission as the broadest mandate with the longest timeline. That characterization was accurate as a summary and imprecise, as a description of what the commission text actually specifies. 1 Enoch 10:11-12 does not say the longest timeline. It gives a number, 70 generations. That number is not ornamental. The Enochic tradition was invested in chronological argument, in calendar reckoning, in the arithmetic of sacred time. A tradition for which the Dead Sea Scrolls provide substantial evidence, and Nicolsburg's commentary provides the standard scholarly framework. Scholars have argued that the 70 generations figure is best understood within a generational arithmetic shaped by the Genesis genealogies, placed inside a sentence whose structure implies deliberate calculation rather than conventional symbol reaching. The timeline has a shape. Michael's commission operates inside that shape, and the shape has an end. Within the commission, the text maintains a hierarchy that the summary characterization does not carry. The leader, Semyaza, named first, named individually, and his associates, named second and named relationally, share the same collective sentence and the same terminal outcome. But the commission does not begin with the group. It begins with the name. Semyaza is named as principal. His associates are named as his associates. The whole group is made to witness the consequences of what was initiated before the imprisonment begins. And because Semyaza is named as the organizer, the witnessing clause carries particular force for him. Michael's authority was not the authority of a uniform binding order applied to a uniform group. It was the authority of an enforcer required to hold a hierarchy. To keep the principle distinct from the associates, to maintain the juridical memory of who organized the transgression. Across the full duration of a 70-generation confinement. Picture the same courthouse in two different cities, built by architects who never met, producing the same floor plan, the same judge's seat, the same dock, the same jurisdictional boundary. That is roughly what the cross-textual comparison with Daniel 10 reveals. That internal architecture, named, ranked, specific adversary, hierarchical structure within the commission itself, is stable across traditions that are not demonstrably in contact. In Daniel, Michael is one of the chief princes, assigned to a specific people, operating within a ranked heavenly court with defined adversaries. In 1st Enoch, he holds one of 4 specific commissions within a 4-fold archangelic structure. Both texts reflect the same Second Temple angelological grammar, named figure, ranked position, specific adversary or ward, defined scope of authority. Collins's scholarship on Daniel and Nicholsburg's on 1st Enoch together document the absence of demonstrable literary dependence with sufficient clarity to make the convergence significant. The office of Michael, its structural characteristics, was coherent enough in Second Temple Jewish theological imagination to be expressed independently in 2 separate contexts and emerge looking structurally the same. Popular tradition reduced this to commander. The authority function was retained. The duration was shed. The hierarchical structure of the commission was shed. The angelological grammar of ranked specific assignment within a structured heavenly hierarchy was absorbed into the generic category of heavenly warrior. What remained was accurate as far as it went, and insufficient as a description of what the texts had actually specified. This series is not arguing that the category is wrong. It is arguing that the category is what you are left with after the architecture has been removed. Michael's commission ends with a duration, not simply a vague horizon, not merely a word for permanence, a bounded interval, 70 generations, and then judgment. Most of Scripture's promises about the resolution of evil and transgression do not include a number. They speak of a day, a time appointed, an end that is coming, without specifying the interval between the commission and the conclusion. The Enochic text, in this particular sentence, does something different. It gives Michael a timeline. It tells him, in the structure of the commission itself, when the custodial phase ends and the terminal phase begins. Whether the authors of 1st Enoch believed the calculation was close, whether they were writing in the 3rd century BCE with the expectation that the generational count was nearing its completion, or whether they intended the 70 generations as a statement about the designed structure of history rather than a verifiable chronological prediction. None of these questions can be resolved from the text alone. The scholarship has not resolved them. This episode does not resolve them. What can be said is this: an angel given a commission with a bounded duration is an angel operating inside a cosmos that has a designed conclusion. A cosmos that is not running indefinitely, without endpoint, but is structured around a timeline with phases, transitions, and a terminal event already specified in the commission that initiates it. The Watchers are not imprisoned forever. The imprisonment has a term. The term ends. And when it ends, what follows is not ambiguous in the text. The abyss of fire, the torment, the confinement that is described for the first time in the commission as genuinely permanent. The temporal imprisonment is custodial. The final judgment is final. Michael was the figure designated to hold that boundary, to enforce the hierarchy between principal and associates that the commission built into its own structure, to maintain the custodial arrangement across the full duration of a term that the tradition's own arithmetic was designed to calculate, to be present, by implication of the commission's structure as its executing officer. At the moment when the term expires and the transition to judgment is initiated, the text does not describe what that moment looks like. It specifies only that there is one, that the commission has an architecture, that the architecture has an end, and that the end was designed into the commission from the beginning.